If you're the parent of a toddler, a preschooler, or an early school age child, you've probably heard this complaint. I am not sleepy. Can I get another hug? I'm not sleepy. Can I get a sip of water? Can I get a hug again? Can I tell you about my day? I'm scared. All kinds of things, right? Even if you have never heard of that excuse before, they can make it. And so this phenomenon is what we call bedtime resistance. And this is extremely common, again, in younger children. And what it ends up doing is it ends up making everybody tired, everybody miserable at bedtime, and ends up causing a lot of sleep struggles. So in this video, we're going to be talking about bedtime resistance and how to address it, how to help your child fall asleep easily. I'm Dr. Afolabi-Brown. I am the founder of Restful Sleep MD and the Restful Sleep Place, where we empower you to make the right decisions when it comes to you or your child's sleep. So if you have not subscribed to this channel, hit that subscribe button. Now, what is bedtime resistance? It's a phenomenon that a lot of our young kids exhibit because there's so much that's going on in their world. It is actually a very common developmental phase in the sense of they are tired, but then they're not really tired, or they're fighting sleep. And it leads to a lot of frustration with the parents. It leads to a lot of exhaustion because everybody's exhausted, but you know they're tired, but they don't want to go to sleep. So I'm going to talk about what really causes this, or why does this come about. One of the first, again, is a normal developmental stage. It is them really just fighting sleep as they get older. And one thing that you might also start to notice is that they might have had a slightly earlier bedtime, and now maybe they need a slightly later bedtime. So it might be because they're not actually sleepy. Another thing that could be happening is FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So everybody else is staying up, watching TV, relaxing around the house. Now you're telling them to stay quiet in a dark room. So they feel like they're missing out on stuff, and so they're naturally going to fight it. A third reason why you might start to see that bedtime resistance is when you have your child develop what we call a second wind. So, the way our bodies work, there's a circadian rhythm or an internal clock that really gives us the send signals to our brain about when we should be alert and when we should be sleepy. And around evening time, sometime between, and this varies with everybody, between like 6 p.m. and about 8 p.m. in kids, there's a natural alertness that comes up. And so they actually call this time, this zone of alertness, more of this forbidden zone of sleep, meaning that if you try to put a child to bed too early, or if you put them to bed too late, you might actually get those sleep struggles. So we call it the forbidden zone of sleep. Again, what that looks like, and you as a parent may have noticed that about yourself, where you're sleepy, right? And then all of a sudden you just have this second wind, you have this burst of energy. So sometimes our kids are experiencing that. And this is something that you might need to be aware of. And depending on what's going on, you may actually need to adjust their bedtime. Okay, now let's talk about actual common triggers. The first I would say is developmental milestone. Depending on what age your child is, they will get to that time where they're fighting for their own independence. They've been told what to do since they were born, and they kind of want to have some autonomy. So they may start to push back in this way to say, I want to dictate when I want to go to sleep. So this is something that you might expect. It doesn't necessarily mean it's right or safe for them, but it's something that once you know that, oh, okay, well, it's you just trying to, fight for some independence, that it helps you to know what strategies to move with. Another thing that could be going on is separation anxiety. So sometimes our kids, as they get older, may feel, like that feeling of my parent is going away. Are they ever going to come back? So they might be having separation anxiety. For separation anxiety, you typically might see some of these also manifest during the day. They're anxious when you're leaving. They may cry when you're dropping them off at daycare. So these are things that you might also start to notice. And I'll tell you some things that you can do to assure them, to help them have that confidence back. And then the third thing when it comes to developmental milestone might actually be that they're fighting boundaries. Again, coming to the independence. We always tend to see that our children, our toddlers, our preschoolers, they want to test their limits. Again, it's a normal part of their development. They want to see, how far can I go? What if I don't stay in bed? What will happen, right? And so they're really relying on you to help establish those healthy boundaries, right? So they might just be testing boundaries. The second kind of trigger that we see oftentimes, and I see in my practice at the Restful Sleep Place all the time, are environmental factors. Now, this might seem to be maybe not a big deal. Of course, you should know this, right? But I really want to draw your attention to it. When a room is too bright, when there's noise outside, when there's a sibling in who's snoring or things like that, or if they have like exposure to screens rather late in the evening, or the bedroom temperature is too hot, you might actually notice that they're having a hard time settling down. And because of that, they may end up fighting bedtime and they may end up with that bedtime resistance. So this is something that you might also want to pay attention to. So whenever you come to see us in our practice, we're asking again and again, what's the bedroom like? What's the noise control like? What's the lighting like, right? What's the temperature like? Those things are very important. And I always bring it on because sometimes we're so used to that we don't pay attention to it. This is really important. Another thing that you might actually notice in terms of just the environmental factor may also be screen time. If they are consuming screens and they're on their iPad or watching TV very close to bedtime, they may be overstimulated. And so that overstimulation makes it really hard for them to wind down. Now, they may be pushing boundaries and asking for said device. And so what you're seeing is you're now in this spiral. So it's really important that you help them to set those healthy boundaries because screen time can contribute to overstimulation, and overstimulation is going to make it hard for them to sleep. And because they actually cannot sleep, they're going to fight bedtime. And then another one I want to mention within this category is irregular schedules. If you don't have a routine bedtime and a routine wake up time, it is completely throwing them off because they don't know. Yesterday they went to bed at 9, now it's 7:30. You're asking them to go to bed, and then on the weekend they're up till 10 p.m. So that irregularity in their schedule might actually be what's impacting them. Even on the back end, in terms of when they wake up, if they are waking up at any random time, it may be that they're actually not sleepy, and so some of that may be because maybe the main reason why they're fighting bedtime. And then finally, within sort of that environmental bucket will be naps. What time is your child taking a nap? If they're taking a nap that is very late in the day, you take a nap at 4 p.m., you're not going to feel sleepy. A 3-year-old or 5-year-old is not going to be sleepy at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., right? Because they need to be awake for certain periods of time for them to be sleepy enough. So you may also notice that is happening. If your child is fighting bedtime, those are things that you want to pay attention to. And then there are also emotional and physical issues. So do they have a sleep issue, sleep disorder like restless leg syndrome? Do they have pain? Do they have fever? Do they have an ear infection? They might actually be protesting that actual physical symptom by not sleeping and by fighting bedtime. Another thing that you want to pay attention to is how are they in terms of anxiety? Are they anxious during the day? Do they have anxiety? And so this is a display of that anxiety when it comes to bedtime. Now they're really distraught, they're stressed out, they don't want to be left alone. So underlying anxiety might actually be a trigger for bedtime resistance. And then another one I would say kind of similar is unprocessed emotion. So if you have a child who is a worrier, who constantly worries, frets, gets nervous, and at bedtime they don't want to go to sleep, it might be because they have emotions that are not processed. So it's really important that you want to lean in and say, what is going on? Right? What is going on? Why are you having such a hard time? Right? So those are things that are important to pay attention to. And then they may actually need time to connect with you as a parent. If you're a busy parent, you've been out all day, you're tired, right? They're tired, but they want that time. They want that bonding time. And so those behavioral issues, the bedtime resistance, fighting bedtime may be their own cry to say, I need time with you. So again, you have to know your child to know where this is coming from, but I think it's very much worth it to do that work of investigating to say, what is going on? Why are you having such a hard time sleeping? Why are you having such a hard time with staying in your bedroom? So those are things that really you want to pay attention to. Okay, so let's go to the solution. I think this is the fun part, right? These again are strategies that work and consistently too. So I'll talk about 5 main categories, okay, in terms of solutions for bedtime resistance. The first I would say is connection before correction. I'm going to say it again, connection before correction. If you have a child who you've not necessarily been able to connect with, you've been tired all day, they've been getting into trouble all day, or, everybody's been so busy, it is important to pull in, reel it all in, reel it all the way in, and find a way to connect with them. And that will look different for different families. I would highly suggest you have some one-on-one time with your child where screens are off, we're just playing or we're just talking, you're spending some time with your mom or your dad. This is time. It doesn't have to be long, 5 to 10 minutes, but they can feel seen, they can feel heard. And I can assure you, many of the behavioral issues just kind of go away because now you filled their cup. Their cup is full. So this is really important. So active listening, moving the phone or the devices or the TV out of the way, just really make bedtime special for them. Make it something they look forward to and be an active part of that bedtime process. And then another one I would say under that same umbrella of connection before correction is make bedtime a beautiful time, not punitive. Listen, when I was growing up, I grew up in Nigeria. If you're in trouble, you go to your room. You're in trouble. You go to your room and sleep. When you're in trouble, you go to your room and sleep. After a while, I started to make that connection. Oh gosh, going to bed is something I did when I was in trouble. So you want to make sure that you don't have that playing a role in your child's bedtime. They should look forward to it. Oh my goodness, the bedtime routine. We get to sing a song, we get to read a book, I get to talk about my day with my mom or dad. Make it something they look forward to. So that's the first thing, connection before correction. And then the second thing we talked about already, the environment. Make sure the environment is appropriate, right? The temperature is cool. The room is nice and dark. Even if they want a night light, it's okay to have a small night light. You want to make sure there's not too much noise going on. And one of the things I always encourage is have a comfort item for your child. It might be a lovey, it might be a stuffed animal, something for them to hold on to. Now, when I have a lot of children who not only have bedtime resistance, but they also actually need their parent to be there with them, you can actually get like your old t-shirt, one that maybe smells of you, and just put it by them. They could hold on to it and hug it really tightly if they're missing you, and you can have conversations around that. So optimize that bedroom environment. That is so, so important. And then the third thing is have a solid routine. Y'all, this is something that is so important. Make sure that the routine is age appropriate. Like, how old is your child? What do they need to have as part of that bedtime routine? Make sure you incorporate it. Make sure that there's adequate wind down time. They can be jumping on the trampoline at 7:30. You can't expect them to be ready for bed at 7:45. So make sure that there is time, appropriate wind down time for them to kind of start to de-escalate, right? This is when you start to shut down the TV. This is when you start to dim the lights. This is when you start to, get them ready, get their clothes ready for the next day, get their pajamas ready, start to tell them, okay, it's time to get ready for bed, right? So make sure you have appropriate wind down time. I would say, especially for our children with sensory issues, our children with neurodevelopmental issues, so children with ADHD, children with autism, you might actually need a longer wind down time. So make sure you pay very close attention to that. And then another piece when it comes to the bedtime routine is consistency. You want to be as consistent and as predictable as possible. We're creatures of habits, and our children are creatures of habits too. So you want to make sure that consistency is key. You do the same thing over and over and over and over again. When you do that, they start to anticipate sleep. They start to anticipate sleep, and there's less of fights. There's less of struggles. And then number 4 would be really handle those power dynamics like a pro. Listen, here's the thing. You're in charge. You're in charge, and your child is looking for those boundaries. They may not sound like it, but they actually need those boundaries. They actually need to feel reassured that there are boundaries in place. There's way things are done. And there are a few things I would say around this. Number 1, give them options. Yes, that's actually the best way you can actually demonstrate boundaries. Give them options. So for instance, they're fighting bedtime and you say, hey, here we go. Here are your 2 PJs. Do you want the Spider-Man PJs or do you want the Rocket PJs? You get to choose, right? Do you want to read your book first or do you want us to sing a song first? What book do you want? Do you want this book or this book, right? Give them options. Don't make the options too many because that will create confusion. But when you give them options, it makes them think, oh my gosh, I get to choose. Remember what I said, our kids are fighting for independence. So when you empower them and say, hey, you get to pick, that empowers them enough to follow through. And then another thing you can do, this is a very popular one I use for a lot of my patients is what we call the bedtime pass. So if they have multiple requests, they're coming out of their room at bedtime, you're walking them back, they're coming back out, give them options. And what those options are is with a bedtime pass. So literally, you create a piece of paper or two and you put it next to their bed, and they have to trade each pass for a request. So they can have requests. There's nothing wrong with that, but you want to limit it to one or two, right? And then on the back end, you could tell them, well, if you hold on to your request, guess what? You could trade it in for a treat the next day. So using the bedtime pass is something that is so powerful. So again, we're really handling those power dynamics well. So then if they want to get out of bed, they have to think, oh, wait, is it worth it or not? Now, if they've used up the passes and they still have requests, this is where you're going to gently and quietly walk them back. There's no conversation. You're as business-like as possible. No more requests, and you walk them back. And you will have to do this multiple times initially before they start to get it. So hang in there. Another thing I would say in terms of the behavioral strategies is what we call bedtime fading. If you notice habitually that your child has this incredible surge of energy and is awake for an hour and a half or an hour or so before they eventually fall asleep, you can actually make their bedtime a little bit later. That's what we call bedtime fading. And so what that does is it sets you all up for success. So they're more likely to fall asleep if they go to bed around the time where they typically fall asleep. And then once they start to fall asleep quickly, within 20 to 30 minutes, then you can make their bedtime earlier. So those behavioral strategies, I would say you can try to combine them with the bedtime fading tactic, especially if you have a child that takes hours and hours to fall asleep. So I've shared 4 with you. And then number 5 is understand when there's a medical issue going on. So I listed a few things. If your child has an ear infection, if your child has restless leg syndrome, if your child has maybe underlying anxiety, if your child has, autism, ADHD, some of those things, those may be clues that they may need to be evaluated by a specialist. And it could be a sleep specialist myself. At least you want to make sure you speak with the pediatrician, because there are testings that you can do to rule out a medical issue before we just assume this is all them just fighting bedtime. They might actually be fighting something beyond just bedtime. So we've talked about a lot of things today. We've talked about the triggers for bedtime resistance. We've talked about solutions. These are proven solutions. And also we've explored when it might be time for you to speak with your child's doctor or to see a sleep specialist. Now, other things, snoring, restless sleep, waking up tired in the morning, really anything that you're concerned about, or you've tried these strategies and it's still not working, it's time to give us a call. It's time to call to speak with someone who exactly will be able to guide you, do the appropriate testing and evaluation, and give you the tools you need. And that's what we do at the Restful Sleep Place. We empower you with value-based, evidence-based strategies to help you and your little one sleep. And we do this by seeing you as a parent, we see your child, we offer visits by telemedicine, we offer visits in person, and we'll be more than happy to work with you. So you can check out our website, therestfulsleepplace.com. Give us a call at 215-607-8297, and we'll be more than happy to welcome you into the family. I hope this has been helpful. Listen, help me get the word out. And share this with a mom or a dad that you know have kids or a child who has sleep issues. You will be doing them the world of a favor. And so until next time, I hope you rest well.